Welcome to Keep Going, a podcast about failure and success, hosted by John Biggs. Every week, we talk to an amazing person about a time they failed and what they learned. And remember, when you're going through hell, keep going.
Welcome back to Keep Going, a podcast about success and failure. I'm John Biggs. Today on the show, I have Craig Greiwe. He's CMO of Go Digital Media Group. But before that, Craig, you had a fairly long and storied career, including repping some really interesting people and experiencing some stuff that really was challenging, but you pulled through. So why don't you tell us what you're up to, and talk about some of these stories.
Yeah, certainly it's in where I am now is a really interesting place, but it's a product of an entire career. Grew up in entrenched poverty in rural Indiana, but ultimately became the chief strategy officer of RNCPMK, which is the division of Interpublic Group, where I served as the lead outside strategist for companies like Verizon, MasterCard, Facebook, and the late Kobe Bryant, whom I represented personally for the last 3 years of his life, or as I'm fond of reminding people, my 2020 started way worse than most other folks. He was looking to transition and was transitioning successfully from being the world's most famous athlete to the world's most famous storyteller. And I was his partner in that journey with him. And certainly that and a number of other experiences have been moments of great challenge and great opportunities to keep going or not. And that's been the story of my life since I was a child in poverty, but one that has carried through to the current day.
Talk to me a little bit about those early years. I mean, I've spoken with a few people on here who have kind of had similar experiences. They overcame quite a bit, discrimination, fear, poverty, like you say. And how do you think that formed your personality right now?
Yeah, I would say from the earliest point, I was on my own from the age of 14. So it wasn't just in entrenched poverty, but financially, feasibly, logistically on my own. From the earliest point of my life, every decision I made mattered. It wasn't just, when I was deciding what job to get, that wasn't just how did I want to spend my afternoons after school. It was the choice of, okay, I could work in food service or I could work in clothing. And I had to make the decision about, well, I think I can afford cheaper food and the employee discount on clothing is going to be more valuable. And those are the two essentials in life along with shelter. And so learn to evaluate every decision, not just based on what was in front of me, but based on every eventuality. I learned to look at everything holistically. Everything is a 4-dimensional chess match. And, had to do that with every aspect of my personal life from that point on, including even the concept of going to college and where to go to college, of where to get a job and how to operate. And that ultimately became my career. Because if you do that enough in your personal life, it becomes how you look at and view the world. And it becomes something that people pay you to do, which is architect those strategies to say, we want to accomplish the impossible. How can we do that? Because certainly getting out of where I grew up and how I grew up would be impossible in any stretch of imagination. So that it's impacted my career, and it's also left an indelible fingerprint on me in the way that I think that the world should operate and how we should all look to foster the world around us, because there are too many people who still face that same choice. And so I spend a lot of my business career figuring out how I can work to do good and do well at the same time.
And you were orphaned at 14, is that right?
Yeah, for all intents and purposes, I was left on my own. I was tossed into a cellar, and if I wanted food, I had to find it. If I wanted anything, I had to source it and scrounge it on my own. It was an unpleasant experience, to say the least, but one that I'm happy to have found my way out of, thanks to a lot of folks who were incredibly kind and, frankly, even in teaching me the concept of what college was and then facilitating me getting there.
What do you recommend for folks who might be in similar situations? Obviously, we're not going to have 14-year-olds listening, but we might have some folks who are trapped in a little bit older. They feel trapped in a situation that they can't escape from. What is the step-by-step to get out of that cellar, quote unquote?
Yeah, I think you actually hit the nail on the head, which is the step-by-step. When we are confronted with these challenges, we feel like we're trapped in a place. We don't have the resources to get out. We don't have whether you're 14 or 18 and you don't know what college or job training is, or you're one of the 2/3 of Americans who report feeling being severely lonely or mostly lonely on at least a weekly basis. There's this feeling of, I don't know what to do next. And there's this overwhelming sense of a wave that comes in front of you. And it is, in fact, can you do one thing, one small thing every day that moves your path forward? If you're in a job you don't like, apply for one new job every day. You may not get a call back from 99% of recruiters, or you may go and research people who work at companies to do informational interviews. The answer is always, can you do one small thing every day, move the ball forward? And if you don't know what that is, start asking the people around you. We are all so reluctant to ask people, and people we don't know, for help. But the reality is that everybody who's a good person, which I inherently believe is most people, is looking to pay it forward. I'm always entranced by these studies where they pay for someone's Starbucks order or McDonald's order in a drive-through, and they see how long the pay it forward goes, and it always goes into the hundreds of cars. So my response is, take one step forward, and there's always going to be someone there that is willing to help.
How do you find people how do you know who to trust? I mean, it feels like that's a little bit cynical to say, but at 14 or a little bit older, how do you find somebody who has your interests at heart?
Yeah, I think you don't know. And that's why I keep going at it every single day. In my later years, in recent years, when I was running a nonprofit in Los Angeles and then later ran for mayor of Los Angeles, a painful experience to be sure. You talk to a whole lot of people who'd be enthusiastic. You talk to a whole lot of people who say they want to help, who don't. The same was true when I was 14 as when I was 40, which is that you don't know who to trust. You've got to take everyone at their word, and you've got to hope that one of those people, 1 out of 10, 1 out of 50 is going to show up, because all you need is one. All you need is one person to help. And so it can be easy to be dispirited, but people are busy. People are pulled in a lot of different directions. People are often suffering from their own crises. You won't know who to trust, and there's no magic bullet. There's no vetting test. There's no on litmus test that you can issue. There's no question you can ask them to double check if they really want to help. You can just ask for help and take the resiliency of knowing that 9 times out of 10, you won't get it, but 1 time out of 10 you will. And that 1 time out of 10 is what keeps my faith in humanity. It's what kept my faith in humanity. It's what allowed me to get where I am. You don't need to succeed every time. Mythology in the world, you got to get it right all the time. Failing most of the time is normal, and that's okay. And we've got to become okay with that. And the resiliency coming out of that is really important.
Tell me about a time, heck, it could even be the mayoral race, when you did fail and what happened there.
Yeah, I failed more than I care to count.
Yeah, I just wanted to pick one.
Yeah, and the mayoral race is certainly one of them. I'm obviously not mayor. I'm actually happy that I'm not mayor of Los Angeles, to be very clear. But it's funny, it was the right decision at the right time for the right reasons. At the time when I joined, it was the only common sense candidate with actual plans, and I was able to inject those plans into the public discourse. Many of those plans are being implemented. Reforms in development here in Los Angeles that have led to over 10,000 new applications for affordable housing to create the housing boom that we need for people to be able to afford to live in this city. My policies around Veterans Affairs and job growth are being implemented by city council members that I remain close with, and by ultimately the winning candidate herself. And then I get to operate in the private sector and drive those same change. So I failed in that I didn't become mayor, and I didn't fail in the fact that what I really wanted was a better city for myself and the people around me. And I get to take the opportunity to craft that every single day. And there are other people that I get to push on to do the same thing. And yeah, failure is hard, to be clear. The race, when people say, oh, was it exciting? Was it interesting? Was it different? I loved engaging with people, but we have created a brutal system when it comes to elections. What we're putting anyone through at the local level or the national level is brutal and does not foster talent or kind people putting their name forward. But the failure is an opportunity still move the ball forward, to still take a look at the opportunities of who I connected with, of putting my policies out there, of getting those policies enacted, and in the meantime, happily returning to the private sector.
Mm-hmm. So tell me about the Kobe Bryant situation. You represented him for 3 years.
Yeah, Kobe was, as we all know, a singular human talent in a generation, and not just for his athletic skills. When he finished with basketball, he wanted to leave professional basketball behind. There are a lot of people who wanted to keep tying him to it, who wanted him to keep showing up to games, wanted him to be a commentator. That wasn't his goal. He wanted to use sports and athletics and the intersection of entertainment to help foster youth development, knowing that sports and the journeys associated, the emotional journeys, the teamwork, the individual journeys those journeys would foster the resilience that children would need to be amazing adults. He wrote and co-wrote and fostered an incredible series of books. It wasn't just Dear Basketball, his Oscar-winning short, which I led the campaign for. It was the Wizenard series and these books. It was the TV shows and podcasts that were all in the works. He said he wanted to go from being the world's most famous athlete to the world's greatest storyteller. And in 18 months, we had 5 #1 New York Times bestsellers and an Oscar. We were well on the way there. And it all came tragically crashing down, as the world is too familiar with. And then we watched as his wife dismantled every aspect of that legacy. There are no more books. There are no more any of those things. Any of the things that he wanted most to continue after his death didn't continue, and we watched her, for personal reasons, dismantle the legacy he was trying to build, and that became incredibly painful. Anyone who knew him, who worked with him and knew what he wanted, who we all gave our all in supporting him on that journey, and he was just as methodical and just as talented and just as sort of driven. The infamous stories about 1,000 free throws and basketballs between folding chairs. He took that same approach. He took months to decide on the paper weight for the books themselves, what it would feel like to hold the book and then turn the page. For a kid, he would go sit in this hut, in his offices, where the world of granity existed. He was just as committed to this universe as he ever was to basketball, and just as committed to the legacy of what millions of children needed in stories that they could relate to, in journeys that they could be a part of, to feel and learn the type of resilience that we don't teach, frankly, in schools, and that many parents don't have themselves to teach their children. He wanted to be the vehicle for that, for millions of children, particularly in the US, and was becoming the vehicle. And it was an incredibly painful experience for anyone who worked with him to not just watch that, not just lose him, but then to watch that entire legacy dismantled piece by piece.
How do you not let frustration associated with something like that hurt you or hurt your future chances or future success?
Well, aside from his very litigious widow coming after people, which hurts people's chances at success, you insulate yourself as best as possible. You focus on the things you can still change and foster. Kobe was one of many clients I had, and so I was able to look and work on other ways to inject positivity in the world, to do good things. I now focus a lot on the Point Foundation, which is the nation's largest LGBTQ scholarship organization. So it's still, what can I do to foster development in youth, with SOLA Impact and its foundation, which does job training and education for at-risk youth and marginalized communities in Los Angeles. So I still find ways to touch those communities and those audiences. And then I look towards other passion points. I think America's suffering from both twin crises of affordability and loneliness. I think you pivot. When one door closes, you got to say, okay, what else am I interested in? Where else can I walk? And where else can I insulate and protect myself? And above all else, can I tell the truth and do the right thing? Is what I'm doing morally and ethically right? And is it true? And as long as you are doing that, it sounds so pie in the sky to say, but it's not wrong. Good people find good people, and good people work with good people. And you've got to keep showing up. I think that you're going to get slammed in the face 1,000,000 times. Happens to me every day. There's a no every day in everything that I do. We have this mythology that out there that I think a lot of people feel like everyone around them is being dealt yeses. They've got a new job, a better opportunity. It's always the grass is greener. It sucks a lot of time out there for a lot of people, and that's okay. You just can't live in it. You can sit in it for a minute. You should sit in it for a minute, let it, feel it, and then move on, move forward. It's not just let it go. It's let it empower you, let it drive you. But let's also get rid of this toxic positivity mythology that you've got to be happy all the time. You can be unhappy some of the time, and then you pick yourself up and you focus on the next concrete thing you can do that's going to be a positive step forward in your life. That's resiliency. It's not some massive achievement, some new job, some great pie in the sky moonshot. It is, did I show up today? And then did I do one thing that was good for the world or good for me or good for someone else?
When do you know it's time to pivot? When do you know it's time to stop one thing and move to the next?
I have been accused of leaving too soon and holding on too long. So I would say that I don't think that I know exactly. I don't think that I wish there were a stopwatch. And I don't know if anyone knows from that respect. I think you try, and then you have a debate with yourself on any given morning, which is, do I want to keep doing this? Is it worth this? Why am I doing this? What is this doing for me? Not why is this happening to me? Why am I facing these frustrations, these challenges? What is this doing for me? I mean, it's not doing anything for me anymore. If I'm not learning something, if I'm not piling those skills forward, that a number of my failures have allowed me to see and avoid future bigger failures. So they were very helpful in that respect. But I don't think I ever really knew it was time to pivot. I think I chose that day and said, okay, now is enough. And the question becomes for any individual, are you still getting something out of it? And is that something enough for you? And if not, hold on for one more day and then let go. But just one.
I wonder, what would you say to that 14-year-old who was discarded? What would you say now to them?
There are a lot of people who, when asked this question, would go back and tell their younger selves, it's gonna be okay, or here's where you're gonna go. I wouldn't, actually. First of all, I don't think I believed myself. It's not what I wanted to hear at the time. When I was 14, I was young and angry and poor and frustrated with the world around me. I felt like I had been dealt the rawest cards in the world. Like I'm the only person I know who knows what it's like to wake up from hunger pains. I don't know that I would go back and tell my younger self that it's going to be any different, because it was knowing that I was at rock bottom that made me do the work. It was the motivation to get out of there. It was a hard, brutal journey. I would say keep trying. I would say keep talking to people, keep asking people for things, but I wouldn't necessarily give some reassurance that it's all going to work out, because I don't think that's what anyone wants to hear. I think I'd say keep doing the work, keep showing up. This sucks. It's okay that it sucks. Use that suck to drive you and focus on little tiny moments of joy. I think the only thing I was missing then was the ability now. We all focus on this big picture idea of happiness that doesn't exist. Happiness is composed of individual moments of joy. What is the tiny moment that gives you joy? Even if it's just growing a plant or playing with a pet, what is the tiny moments of joy? Those moments are what create resiliency. They're what create softness in humanity. It sounds silly to say, but it is the constellation of those moments that creates the resiliency and happiness.
That's beautiful. Craig, are you working on anything that people should know about? Should head somewhere?
Yeah, so certainly I love my work that I do now at Go Digital Media Group. We have a number of different companies, Sync Music, and some amazing artists, Fuerza Regida, Jimmy Humilde. I think that the vast majority of people should check out. I think we're the number one in Latin music, and I think not enough people realize that it's more than just Bad Bunny. So I would tell anyone to go listen to that music, because I think there's an opportunity there. But I'm also really excited about the work that I do outside of my job. I think for those who are in need, whether you know someone or you are someone in need around this, if you come from the LGBT community, I think you should look at the Point Foundation and organizations like that, which is the nation's largest LGBT scholarship organization, giving out over 800 scholarships a year to LGBT youth across the country who would otherwise be couch surfing instead of going to college. Solar Impact and its associated foundation in Los Angeles, I would send people there because I'm obsessed with affordable housing. And when it comes to loneliness and resources, I would tell everyone that out there, I think this, like I said, this country suffers from a crisis of loneliness and suffers from a crisis of affordability. And I would actually send them not to something I'm working on. I would actually send them and I would say, ask one friend or acquaintance today how they're doing and tell them you want the honest answer. Because if you don't know the mental health status of your friends, then you're not a friend at all. And too many of us forget that the people around us probably have many of the same questions and feelings that we do. And it feels good to talk about those things. So I won't, my company and Sync Music and Solar Impact and Point Foundation are all amazing. But the thing I'd ask more than anything is go ask a friend how they're doing. Because that's certainly how I live my life. And I think that's the keep going part of it, is we can all keep going when someone else out there is interested in whether we keep going.
Wonderful. Greg, thank you for joining us. This has been
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed the podcast, and so I'm really excited to be on it.
No, thanks. This has been Keep Going, podcast about success and failure. I'm John Biggs. We'll see you next week.